Welcome everyone to part 2 of Sister Nancy Lee Smith's talk, To See and Be Seen with the Eyes of Love, the Language of Icons. And Gilbert's going to introduce her a little bit more.
So again, this is part 2 of a series when we, as a committee, were looking at different elements of different artists. Nancy came across us, and as an icon writer for 29 years, she's trained in the Russian School of Icon Writing, and has done brilliant work all around the country and has pieces internationally as well. So we asked Nancy if she could put together both a narrative of the impact of icons that have been with her, as well as the making of icons. So this part 2 will focus a bit more on the making, but there'll also be these encounters of the spirit, I would say, of how it has impacted her. We'll be using video and we'll break it in 2 locations to respond to questions. And Nancy will have a few questions also for you, but we'll go from there. Any beginning comments, Nancy?
No, nothing.
Okay. Any from the community that's gathered here?
Is this a camera?
No. Camera's right there.
What is this?
That's your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We'll be starting in just a second once I get this up and running.
Realized it. My mission is to depict God as beauty and to fascinate others with God's beauty. God is not just love. God is not just truth. God is beauty. Amen.
Oh, because that's theirs. That's from them.
Good morning. My name is Sister Nancy Lee Smith, and I am here to share what this ministry is involving icons. When I did Padre Pio's icon, he had one of those humps because it was a 3/4 image. Okay, now I think I'd like to explain to you a little bit about how they're made, what goes into making one. I went to Mount Sinai and I got to see the oldest icons in the world. And incidentally, those go back to the 6th century because they were outside the domain of the Empire of Byzantium, and they were not destroyed during the iconoclast period. And I saw the oldest image of Mary, and she's in blue. And all the icons of Mary just about since she's in red because of the cultures from which they came. The Russians and the Ukrainians and the Lithuanians and the Germans, all those people have icon traditions. So I climbed up those steps at this outdoor exhibit at Mount Sinai, and I got to the very top and I turned around, and that icon on the wall of Christ with the piece of above the lamp, that icon was there, only it was this big, it was this wide, and it was this high. And I turned around and I saw it, and the beauty smacked me in the chest. It was so beautiful. I burst into tears. You could feel the presence of Jesus immediately through that icon. And the icon of Mary in the blue was this big right next to it. It was just powerful. I have many, many books that have images of icons in them. And it's one thing to see an image in a book, but it's another to be in front of the actual icon. It's a different whole experience. I have 3 icons here that are in process. My next commission and my last of icons, I have a commission to do a painting, but of icons, is the Annunciation, the Visitation, and the Nativity for New Mallory Abbey in Peosta, Iowa, near Dubuque. And I want to get it done. They're $3,500 a piece, so they're not cheap. When you get miniature and small faces, the prices go up because it's a lot more technical and difficult to do. So the next step is you apply the gold leaf. So I'm going to turn it over here so you can come closer. All right, this shows you the gold leaf. And then I haven't even talked about the process of prayer, and I intend to do that. But let's say that process was basically clear enough that you knew how to move with the image. Okay, because you have to wait in prayer for that to come. You see it in your head. You do not sit down and start scribbling. You've got to see the thing in your head first. Okay, so here's Elizabeth and Mary, and the two babies, and the house of Elizabeth, and this represents Mary's traveling. And you transfer the image onto the board with graphite paper. If you use wax paper, it resists paint. You always use graphite paper. You trace the image, and then you take a fine brush and you outline everything in India ink with the brush. And after you do that, then you take a Q-tip and dip it in water and outline what's separating gold leaf from the part that's going to get paint. And you always do the gold before you ever paint. Because if you don't, you get flecks of gold all through your piece and it's sloppy. So then you do that. And so you wet that part about to there. And then you take a stylus, which is a needle point, and you make a groove separating what's going to get wet. And then you wet the next area and you separate that, and you wet the next area. You work your way around till you got it all this outside there's a fine groove all the way around. All right. Then it's time to do the gold leaf. And when you do the gold leaf, you have patented gold, which means it's each 3 1/8 by 3 1/8 piece is attached to a piece of tissue. And that's patented gold leaf. I have a box of it. And when I bought it, it was half as expensive as it is now. Right now, each sheet is worth $2. It used to be $1. So just so you know what you're dealing with here. So what you do is you take the sizing, you buy a special sizing meaning glue, comes in a can, and you use a Q-tip and you put the sizing on. First you put some shellac on to seal what's going to get the gold. And then you put the sizing on, and anywhere from 2 to 5 hours it takes to dry enough. And when it's dry, if you have no tack, then you know it's ready. And then you take your gold leaf piece. I'm not going to do it for you, but you have that sizing and it's ready and it feels dry. So you breathe an area. Here's the line right here and right here, 3 1/8 by 3 1/8. You go, and you vaporize till you get dizzy. And then while you're doing it, you're holding the tissue paper in one hand and the additional sheet of paper that goes over it. And you breathe and breathe and breathe, and then you set it on and put the tissue on, and then you rub very evenly with a lot of pressure. Peel the 2 off, and you set one. Now, I had 7 by 12 foot icons over on that table. The metal panel was 5 feet by 7 feet, and we blew ourselves to dizziness when we did that. I had some apprentices at that time that helped me. So that's how you apply that. And it's raw gold, and it's very dangerously fragile. So you put it in a hot box like over there. and you turn on the light switch, and it's a 40-degree bulb, and you let it dry overnight. Then the next day, you take a brush and you go through your hair and get static electricity, and you start to pick up the excess, because you always make them overlap. If you don't, you have a white gap showing and no gold. And the gap moves away, and then you're left with no gap. So you have to do all of that all the way around, the whole deal. After you do that, then you give 2 coats of spar varnish on top of it, and you've sealed it. This one's sealed. I can touch it without damaging it. Now I'm ready to paint. Now here's an icon I'm working on. It's already been grooved. You can feel the grooves. It's ready to have the gold leaf process start. This will go here, and this will go here. And I call it the extended Holy Family. Here's Joseph, Mary, Jesus, and Joachim and Anne, the parents of Mary, of Jesus. Yeah, the parents of Mary. And that will open up like that. This is what it'll look like, basically, only I changed the saints. My Russian teacher did that one. Then the next step is you do the painting, and you take your egg, you crack it, and you roll the yolk. You get rid of all the egg whites, because that makes meringue and that stiffens things, and that makes paint crack. And you roll the yolk around and pull the swirlies off, and sometimes it helps to lay it on one of these and roll the yolk, and then hold it very gingerly. Make a tiny little hole and drain the juice of the yolk out. And you mix that almost with equal parts of white wine. By the way, 100 proof vodka, white wine, and beer are part of the process of making an icon. But it goes into the work, not into your mouth. And then that is mixed with these pigments. And here's what some of the pigments look like when they come from Kremer Pigments in Germany. And also over here, when you're actually doing the painting, these are my pigments. There's all these different colors here. And here's the Lake Baikal, Siberia lapis lazuli. Now, twice that much, about 1995, cost me $300. So imagine what that costs now. She weighed it out on a scale that had grams. She was very precise. And then there's another one there's another blue that's lapis lazuli from Fra Angelico lapis lazuli blue. This is also lapis. It's from a different country. And then all these pigments, and there's a formula for what to use and when and how to do it. So these are very precious, these pigments. And this is cinnabar from China right here. That's mercury. You always have to be careful because the powders are poisonous. And these are 2 pinks from the soil in the former USSR, and she gave them to me. 2 shades of, these are ochres, which means dirt. O-C-H-R-E, ochres. And these went into the Father's pink figure. And I got to tell you, when I was painting that figure, when I was writing that icon, we don't say painting, we say writing. When I was doing that, and it was great big, and it was right there, and I finished doing the pink ochre on the Father figure, I had this electric moment where I felt the presence of Andrei Rublev himself, because I just knew instantly that that was the very pigment he used on the original icon. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like that clear moment came. And a lot of other people take red and add lots of white to it and make their pink, but this is real dirt from that part of the world. And Rublev moved from Moscow down all the way to Greece to study with Theophan the Greek for a while to learn iconography and get better at it. And he traveled back up and he garnered ochres on his way. And that's what Ksenia did as a former physicist in research science. She got the geologists and went with her, and they went around and got all these precious rocks. The last step is called the Olifa, O-L-I-F-A, and it's made with 2 parts boiled linseed oil and 1 part stand oil, and you warm those up. And that's what you pour it over the icon while it's hot. And you use your finger and you finger the whole icon and get in the corners and everything. And that sits for most of a day. And then you finger it off. And when you see a kind of a cloudy area and not shiny, that means the oil didn't penetrate. So you keep putting hot oil on it. You keep doing it. It's a big, long day process. And then when you're all done, then it's sealed. And it takes a good 2 months to completely dry. The boards are prepared by having rabbit skin glue, which is particles like Renox gelatin, only much, much stronger. And the people of the Mesopotamian Valley, as well as the Native Americans, all used rabbit skin glue. They were smart. So the skin of a rabbit produces this powerful glue. And that is poured over cold water, because what happens when you're going to make Jell-O and you put it in hot water? It beads up and it never dissolves. So you have to dissolve it in cold water, and then you turn on the heat and slowly bring it up. And it's a certain percentage of glue versus water. You put it in and then you put a coat on top of your icon board. These are called splines. These are mahogany boards. I have great big ones in there, but this is easier to pick up. So these are splines because you're putting all the moisture on one side, and these counter push the grain so that it stays flat. So when you're preparing the board, you put the glue on while it's warm. And you give it a good coat. Then you make another mixture that's stronger. And you take a piece of limp cheesecloth and you cut it so that it's wider all the way around than the board. And you put that in, and you have to fold it in half, and then fold it in half and fold it in half. There's a certain way to fold it. See how stiff that is? I had a piece of that was this long. And when I held it up, it didn't bend at all. It was that stiff. And that's put in, and you have to put it into the cracks. One little tiny air bubble spot will make the gold leaf jump off the wall 6 months after you finish the icon. You have to really put these on right. So that puts that on. Then you make a mixture of chemist chalk from Champagne, France, two scoops of that per 1 scoop of marble dust. And I go to a place that makes Formica countertops to get my marble dust, because they use marble. And you mix that together with the rabbit skin glue, and we put a pot here that's this big, and we mix a whole pot, and you sprinkle a little, and it has to eat it, and then you sprinkle some more, and it has to eat it, and you stir it very slowly so you don't get air bubbles. That's what you then pour into a container that you put into the refrigerator, from a Tupperware container, and the next day you bring this heavy thing out because it's got marble dust that's turned into gesso, and you set it down, and then you demold it like you would a Jell-O or something, and then you spray formaldehyde all over paper toweling, which is NyQuil throat spray. Did you know that's formaldehyde? And you make it all green, and you wrap that, because this is all organic and it has to be refrigerated or it develops mold and you can't use it. So you do that, and then you wrap it up. And then when you're ready to use it and start applying it with a spackling knife, all over the whole thing, you take a slice off and put it on top of your board and cover it and leave it for about an hour and a half till it's room temperature. Then it's spreadable. Otherwise, it's like real firm Swiss cheese. Now, here's a board that was all done. And notice.
We're back live and ready for questions. But Nancy was just going to explain that last part because it requires a level of sanding that's really quite unique.
I have a board here that has 9 coats of gesso that have been dried, and it's dried over the cheesecloth and all that you just saw the process. It's quite smooth, and then I use a Makita sander. Those are very special, and you lean down and you put a lot of weight on it, and you push and you push and you sand until you see the cows coming home, you know. It's got to be just as smooth as a piece of marble, and it really is when you get done. But it's vulnerable too, a little nick here or there, and that's where the beer, that's where the vodka, the 100, has to be 100 proof vodka comes in. When you're putting gold leaf on it, if there's a little tiny hole, it just won't suck into the hole. So you put a paintbrush, a fine little, very fine one, dip it in the 100 proof vodka, and you then dip it into that little round box of gold, and it clings to it, and you go to the hole, and it sucks it right in, and it works.
And so we'll open it up for some questions. Again, there's going to be some more technical parts to it in the next segment, and also a little bit more about some of the meaning that you see within icons, as well as what some of the color meanings are. But I open this up now. Pam, if you want to moderate, or... Are there any questions?
I can mention this other thing then.
Sure. Okay.
We've talked about the prayer process in the first webinar, and there was something I thought was important that perhaps you all have experienced yourselves. So you might think about this. When I am working on an icon, sometimes a year of asking the saint to show me how to, what image to use to capture their spirit, and it just seems to be going nowhere. And you ask and you pray and you fast, you do what you have to do. There's 4 wavelengths of the brain, and right now we're in the process of beta because we're talking back and forth. When you're in a more prayerful, peaceful state and you're not attending to a TV show or talking with anyone, you're in alpha, and these are measurable wavelengths of the brain, the alpha and the beta. The delta are the ones that start around 3 a.m. and they're very deep and very big, and they are the wavelengths that restore the muscles of the body. If you've ever had fibromyalgia, you know what a difference it makes. You wake up at 3 in the morning, you never get back to sleep, and then your muscles go through this lactic acid crash if you do just the slightest bit of exertion. But theta are the wavelengths that you experience when you're first waking up and when you're falling asleep. And when you fall asleep, when you're in theta, images come to you. It's a very creative moment. And I was wondering if some of you artists or architects have experienced that. I find that with icons. I've been struggling, I've been asking the saint, and with St. Alphonsus in particular, and I had that experience where he said in my heart down in Missouri at his parish, before you knew me, I knew you. I'm the one who was in front of that icon with the Blessed Mother when you were there, and I asked her for you. And it brings tears every time I recall that moment. I got home And when I went to bed, there was the head of Paul, just as clear as could be in front of my mind, in my head. I could see it. And I knew that the head of Paul was so similar to Alphonsus's head. And from all the photographs and paintings I've seen of him. And I knew which way to move then. So what about the rest of you?
Have any of you as artists experienced that level where there's some clarity, I guess, of the vision?
Like an image comes when you're falling asleep or when you're waking up. Right in that, those are the moments when you're in theta. Well, the other thing is, if you don't know, think about it and see what happens.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll continue on.
She's got green on.
Oh, Marilyn, do you have a question? Nope, okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll continue on. Just 1 second. Oh, where did it go? Okay. We just need to cue it up.
Go past all that.
Yeah.
Okay, now those are good. Yeah. There. And the nativity is usually shown with the Byzantine pillow and the Virgin and the cave. And notice the eyes on the animals. The animals always know their maker. They always know whose presence they're in. Like my little Mary over there. They always know. And this is 24 karat gold on here. And it's applied with, it's called clay bowl. And it's a mixture of ground up red clay mixed with hide glue. And that's put on. You buy that stuff all done. Otherwise you make it yourself. Anyway, this one's ready to have the final layer. And the cave represents not only the cave of Bethlehem, but the cave of the tomb of Jesus' burial. And it almost looks like Jesus is wrapped not just in swaddling clothes, but in burial clothes. This is a double meaning every time they show this, because it's the whole mystery right there in front of you. So that's the final step. So here's the drawing. The graphite paper was underneath and I traced it. And then this is in process. It's not done. I haven't done all the details yet. But this is a copy of Rubeloff's. And I have a big book in there called Russian Icons. And the picture I copied was only that big. So Mary was about that big. And I used a magnifying glass to get every single line and did one step at a time until I got that thing transferred into this size. So this one's almost ready for the final details. Just barely got the faces started. Now, when a drapery is over a scene, that means that the activity you're looking at is taking place inside that building. It's a convention. And when an arm is extended, that means that person is talking. So the angel is saying, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord." And she's saying, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord." And the angel is saying, "Hail Mary, full of grace." So they're talking and their hands tell you that. This one's finished, this one's not. Now you notice you don't put in dark shadows. The dark shadows are already there. That's the color that's used for the flesh. When you go to Ukraine and Lithuania, the color is a lighter skin tone. And that's called sankir, that color, Sankir. And then you start to bring up the highlights. And when you bring the highlights, you leave the low lights there. So then you know where the chin is and where the neck is and all of that. But you never put those in. Those are done first, and then you just start working on highlights. This represents the house of God, and this represents the house of Mary. And she, notice her feet are on a platform, and she's in a throne-like chair. if I showed you the picture, you would hardly be able to get it on your camera. All this gold trim is put on after the paint is on. And that's put on with beer glue. And you take a boomba of beer, a 40-ounce bottle of beer, and you boil it for a whole day and reduce it to about that much in a cup. And I was working on a 12-foot icon the day I was doing that. And I forgot, and I was so busy that I let it boil too long. And there's a drive-through place where you get beer and wine over 3 blocks from here across the river. And I went in and said, I need another boomba. And she gave it to me, and I paid her and drove back. I did it again. I did it a third time. So I went back to the lady and I said, really, I'm doing religious pictures. And she handed me a 6-pack because she was out of boombas, and she said, here, it's yours on the house. So you boil it for a day, and then what you do is you smear chemist chalk. Now this braid is parallel lines. Notice how straight they are. And you'll see the icons over there in the mother house where the gallery is. You smear chemist chalk to make it frosty. Then you use a distilled water. You always use distilled water for everything you do in this, so you don't adulterate the colors. And then you fine brush and you do the lines, because the frostiness shows you where the line is. And if one line touches another, you smear it till you get parallel lines, and you do them perfect. When you get that done, then you take your beer glue and mix it with a little bit of distilled water, tiny bit, and you mix that, and then you paint the lines with beer glue, and it's still frosty around it. Next day you come and you go, oh, and you can go bury the dead and go on vacation and come back, pick it up, and you breathe. And while your mouth is down there breathing, you start rubbing a much bigger brush than this into the gold after you get static electricity on it, and then you daub the gold on. That is not gold paint. That's all daubed gold. And I have a 6-foot Christ the King figure. It's a copy of Rublev's at Christ the King Church in Ann Arbor. And the whole figure was life-size, and it was all covered in gold assist. And that's how that's done. Okay? And in reality, I gave a conference one time, the North American History Conference for the Redemptorists, and it was all of their archivists and some of their superiors from all of the United States and Canada. And there was a gentleman, one of the archivists from Edmonton, Alberta, and he said, I will be very interested to see what you have to say about the icon. And it was the actual icon that I had prayed in front of in Kirkwood. That parish is now not a Redemptorist parish, and it was returned to the Redemptorists. It was that very icon. That was very powerful for me. It was right next to me when I was doing the lecture. So when you have a blow-up of that face and you really look at it this big, there's the most serene, beautiful, calm, looking into the future of his destiny with total peace and acceptance. He's not afraid. And the legends about the icon, about fear and all of that, don't really apply. Here the sandal was falling off. When Boaz negotiated for Ruth to be able to glean in the field of his neighbor, he sealed the contract by taking his sandal off and handing it to him. And it's a sign of a contract or being a surrogate for somebody. So Jesus, with the bare foot, that's a very significant sign of vulnerability on our behalf. That's what that means. And so, and then the words, looks like M-P-O-Y, but when you know Greek, the P is the R. And it's Mater Theou, Mater, M-A-T-E-R, Theou, Theta, O-U. And that means, and the little symbol above it means it's an acronym, so it's the first and last letters of those words. That means Mary, the Mother of God. And then ICXC is the same thing, and it's Jesus Christus in Greek. The first and last letter of Jesus and Christus. And then in the halo of Jesus, the Ha Omicron, and the Ha is always here, and the Omicron is there and there, but it's missing in this one. I'm surprised. And that's the O with the little mark over it. Without the mark, it's an Ah. With the mark, it's a Ha. And it means the one who is. It's like the message at Mount Sinai to Moses, the one who is.
Yeah.
So,
Because we go to the gallery now.
Okay, we're back live. And so opened up for questions. And I'll ask one. In that nativity scene, you used a different term for the gold that's in the background. I think you called it
clay bowl.
Clay bowl.
Yeah.
But is that different than the gold leafing where you're placing it on sheets? And when would you use one versus the other?
The gold leaf is the same in both. It's what makes it adhere. And clay bowl is crushed, ground up, baked red clay from the earth, mixed with hide glue. And hide means from an animal. Every single thing you do in an icon, everything is organic. Nothing is commercial or chemical. So those things together make a bowl that's put on as a wet, heavy, dark red. It looks like a paint. And then you sand that real smooth. Then you breathe on that because the glue's already in it. The other process, you put the glue, it's called sizing, it comes in a can, and you paint that on with a brush. Has to be very even. When that sizing has a tack and it's just right, then you breathe on that and the gold leaf sticks. The clay bowl looks better because it's using 24 karat gold and the other ones are using 23, but that doesn't have to be that way. I did that in a class, and that's what they provided for us to use. And I've used clay bowl since then, but it's a little more to manage than just a little can of sizing that you use. And the sizing, again, is all organic.
Okay, question from Kate. If you can unmute. Yeah.
Turn your voice on.
How's that?
That's it. Thank you.
Good. My question has even the title of this, to see and be seen. Is there something about creating an icon looking out to the viewer, or in some icons, if like with Mary and Child, the eyes are looking at each other? Is there some kind of theology of looking or eyes that have to do with the icons?
Yeah, the next part, we're going to get into that, but I'll just begin part of it now. The beauty of having a real icon rather than a nice board with the picture of the icon adhered to it that you can buy from these expensive places is that you are being seen, and it's a two-way window. And I have that picture in the studio of that deer looking through that door wall at a cat, and the cat looking at the deer. And that was taken after a hoarfrost blizzard where the fog comes in and horizontally puts cold icicles on them. And if the window wasn't there, the cat would be a little scared. And who knows what the buck might have done. That's the power of a real icon. You are actually being seen. John of Damascus, as I said at the beginning, says that icons are on a par with Scripture. Icons participate in the merits of the saint depicted in the same way that the relics do. That icons actually are part of the mystery. They are sacred art. They are not religious paintings in any way, shape, or form. They are sacred art. It's another whole genre. And it is a two-way window. There's a theologian in Nova Scotia who writes, and he calls them telephones to God. But God talks back on the telephone. And other people have called them windows, and other people have called them mirrors that show God looking at us. And then, so that's what you see in that first icon of the Holy Trinity, where the shape between them means and the vanishing point is out in front with the inverse perspective. That's why you're drawn into it. You're being seen. And there are moments where you really just feel that so strongly. So
Yeah.
we're going to get into that next. I'm glad you asked that
Okay.
question.
Yeah, it was a nice lead up. Any
Mhm.
other questions? Our last, yes, Marilyn.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are the icons that you do, well, you talked about doing like St. Alphonsus that are original to you. Are there certain icons that are, what do I want to say? Like certain ones of Mary that you're like copying another
Sure.
image of icon? So do you do both?
Yes. The icons that are very ancient are in open domain. They're not
Mhm.
modern day icons are copyrighted by the artist who comes up with that image. But the open domain ones are free to copy. Mother of Perpetual Help from the 3rd century is a good example that the Redemptorists have in Rome.
So would you say that the majority of the icons that you do are a result of your prayer and your interaction with the particular saint that you are writing?
Well, because I was commissioned to do about 25 founders and foundresses, yes. But I've done at least 25 of the traditional ones too, for churches, for this or that. Most of it, I don't know, I guess it'd be a little more than half would be original. I don't even know how many icons I've ever written. I've done it full time for 29 years, and I just don't know. There are a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
So with that, we'll move into the last segment, which will be about 12 minutes. And so we'll try to cut it a little earlier so that we can open it up for any final questions. And also feel free to put those in the chat, and then Pam can moderate from there if we need to.
So this is Peter, and you see the front, the side, and the back
Did you take your picture off?
all brought forward. So it's like
Did you
little
take your
girls who play paper dolls, and they
Yeah.
cut the
A
little
video?
things on the outside edges, and they make the doll something that can be pinched around, an object.
my picture on there?
Of course, you guys wouldn't know what that means, but but little girls know. Now this is not fancy. It doesn't have gold leaf, but it's probably my very best work in terms of the highlighting and the way it was done. She really helped me with that. And notice how the structure of the body, I want you to come real close on this because I'm going to show you details you can't see any other way. So this, you can see that there's a leg there and there's a form underneath the drapery. That's good painting. That's good writing of an icon. And notice that in an alive person, the joints are the springs of action. A dead person, what's the first thing you do when you get old? Your joints go. When you're young and spry, your joints are real limber. And that's why the joints are always highlighted. And come very close. I want you to see the fingers. Get as close as you can. Notice how the fingers, the knuckles, every joint of each finger is highlighted. The ojivki are the names of the words. That's the Russian word for the highlighting, the ojivki. And notice it's true in the face, the cheekbone, the eyebrow, and the head. Okay, now when you're going to do an icon, in an icon, all the light comes out of the eyes. So you never put a little dot of white on the eyes of an icon. And sometimes people I know who take classes from other people, they have a white dot on there. They're totally destroying the theology of the icon. The eyes are the windows of the soul, and love comes out of the eyes. And so a white dot means that there's a light coming towards the figure. You don't ever want that. So that the white of the eye going around the cornea is the only white you put, but that's because you're writing the eye. The corners of the eyes are never brought together like women's mascara. They're wide apart. If they're done correctly, they're wide apart. You cannot close off love. And you see that right here very well. And also right here, the corners are wide open. And the halo breaks into the border. See? When they're done correctly, except when it's a distant scene. And the halos are not holiness symbols. They're symbols of love. Love will never be fenced in by any border or cordoned off. And notice how they're rimmed in red. Same reason. And the borders mean north, south, east, west. That's what it means. Love will go to the far reaches of the globe. It's all in the symbol if you paint it correctly, if you write the icon correctly. And I want you to see the puff lines in the neck right here? That means they're full of the breath of the Spirit and they're ready to blow the Spirit out on you. That's why they have these funny looking puffy necks. And notice when the light goes up, you have the arch of the eyebrow bone because it sticks out. And if I got underneath here and you looked at me, you would see that, but you wouldn't see the shape of the forehead. So the forehead is a promontory, there's a shadow line, and then the eyebrow bone sticks out. It's anatomically extremely correct. The skull bones are right there underneath the skin. And then if two pin lights shone up, that's what you'd see. If two pin lights shone down, you would have a dark philtrum under the nose, and you would have a dark upper lip, and you'd have a dark space under the bottom lip. And that's exactly how those are done. And here's the ha omicron I was telling you about, the accent mark over the ah. My Trappist friend, it had a mark missing on the one. And he said, Nancy, that's just an ah, it's not a ha. I said, oh, okay, we put the mark on it, made it a ha. Not the one who is, but the one who is. That's the difference. Now notice the platform that they're both on. And she's wearing red shoes. St. Anne, the Blessed Mother, St. Catherine of Alexandria are always in red shoes. Now remember when the Pope had red shoes? Pope Francis ended that tradition. The red shoes was started by some emperor when the Pope he was the ruler of the Papal States. He no longer has the Papal States. Francis said, no, none of that stuff. No more pomp and circumstance. So he got rid of the red shoes. It means she's a queen, a spiritual queen. So Mary, Anne, and Catherine of Alexandria. So this is the marriage bed. The icon is this tall, and it's on the front wall of St. Anne's Church, 3 miles from the Pentagon. That's where it's hanging. And it's, I went to talk at all 5 masses, and I said to them, you're going to have the marriage bed on the front wall of your church. And they really liked that idea, the whole sacredness of the sacrament of matrimony. Here's the angel of the countenance of God before I realized that that's the true name. And this is the colors of the actual finished piece of the one you saw me in progress with. And there's real Lake Baikal, Siberia lapis lazuli in that veil in the accents. And when I took it up to him, Vladislav Andreev with this big long beard, he doesn't turn to you. He talks to you like this, and you're over here. And I showed it to him, and he went like this. Veil is almost as good as mine. That was a compliment coming from him, because he's gone around with paintbrushes and gone right over what people did because they were doing it wrong. This is a close-up of a 5 or 6 foot cross hanging over, free hanging in space over an altar in it's either Ortonville or Lake Orion. Ortonville, Michigan. That's the whole cross. And I did the middle section for a Dominican nun in Great Bend, Kansas, who wanted to have, she wrote a song, she wrote a whole series of songs, and the name of the album was going to be I Will Take the Fire, and that was the lead song. And so I took that and I put flames and water around it, and you can see a picture of it in that portfolio book, and it won a second prize National Printers Competition Award. And you can see a picture of the flame in the face. So that's what this image of Christ on the cross came from. That's St. Anne holding Mary. And when you have a different color as the highlighting, that's called double reflection. And you saw that in the Holy Trinity icon when I showed you that. And here's Mary, and she's looking at her mother, and her hand is all the way around her neck right there. And when I was painting her, and I was painting her eyes in the studio, for just a nanosecond, I felt her presence, about that far above my shoulder while I was working. And I knew she was pleased. It was just a sense. And when she was gone, there was such a sense of her femininity and her sweetness that was like you couldn't smell a perfume, but it was like a mystical perfume, you might say. It was just so beautiful. And I had that one other time when I was painting this icon, and I had a student there, and he's standing real close to me, and I was showing him how to do the blood coming out of the side of Jesus. He was making it too thick, and it had to be thin and transparent. And I was showing him, and all of a sudden my hand quivered, and I felt as if I was Mary washing out the pericardium of Jesus' heart for his burial. And it was just another one of those intimate moments. Just things happen. All iconographers have these experiences. We're not special. God is just kind and gives us those moments. This is that 6 foot one in Ann Arbor that I was telling you about. And all that is gold assist put on with beer glue. We used a lot of beer on this one. And this is the 4 evangelists. And this one is John. And when I was painting John, my whole heart just kept saying to him the whole time, what did you see? What did you see when your head was on his chest the Last Supper? What was it you saw? It was just like a dialogue going on. And the cherubim going around, and the seraphim, and the throne, the chair. I am the light of the world. The one that followeth me shall not walk in darkness. This is the founders of the Sisters of Incarnate Word. They had a national meeting, and they're separate entities. They're like more than just separate provinces. They're like separate congregations in a way, but they all have the same founders in Ireland. And so this is about this tall, and it's round. And Jeanne Chazal de Martel, and I went to her birthplace in Lyon, France, and that was the very place where she had lived when she grew up. And then this is the Holy Trinity right here, a miniature, and she's gazing at that, but she's practical, and she knows there's needs all around her, and she's holding bread.
And we are back for the final part. So again, at this point, I'll just open it up for any kind of final questions. I know we only have about 4 or 5 minutes, but any questions? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, I've been sitting here thinking about what a marvelous, for you, a spiritual journey in the writing of these icons and a meditative process, a prayerful process, and reflecting on how valuable that could be for others to sit with these works and to pray and to meditate. But I'm wondering about translating that experience into group experiences, like a retreat experience or, for example, I very often find building committees or parishioner groups, when we're talking about art, they don't seem to be willing to take any time to kind of meditate on what art is and how it can be powerful and a source of prayerful insights. And I just wanted to, like you could do a whole webinar on this, of course, but if you have any comments on that aspect of how art like this can be used to bring people to a deeper appreciation of art in general, maybe would be the question.
Sure. I think that's excellent. What you remind me of is the number of icon retreats I've given, of sometimes a week long, sometimes a weekend. Like go to a mother, I did about 20 or 25 foundresses of religious congregations. So I go there and present it to them, and sometimes it would be a whole weekend of prayer and another part of it. And then also I invite them to bring an icon of their choice. That it's there. And while doing that, you can have experiences with the statue. My first major was metal sculpture, and you can do a statue and have an encounter with the saint through that. The art is a doorway for encounters. The beauty of icons is that it is sacred art, though. It actually participates in the mystery. But God isn't limited. I mean, Alphonsus Liguori was preaching one time in the church in Italy, and while he was preaching, the statue of the Blessed Mother all the way across the church shone a light on him. And everybody was listening to him, but they were very distracted that Mary was listening too. And that was just an ordinary statue. Now that's phenomena that we don't expect to see, but people can be invited to come and have I've done many retreats like that, to be invited to learn how to pray with an icon, and then how that opens the door to pray with, with your rosary, or with going out into the woods and staring at beautiful animals and creation. Anything that calms the spirit, puts you into alpha, takes you into deep encounter with God, is a doorway for anyone. They don't have to be pieces of sacred art, but they are, icons do. They're called doorways to heaven. They're called windows to heaven. That's why. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I would think that after a webinar like this, you could spend some time yourselves, just being with God and saying, where are you in my life? Where are you in my art? And then how could I share that, meaning yourself, with others?
I think that's a beautiful way to end this webinar. On behalf of the Association of Consultants for Liturgical Space, thank you, Nancy, for these two webinars that are really just remarkable, both in learning the technique, but more importantly, the influence it has on you and your ministry of engaging people into this world in a unique way. So thank you, Nancy. And I will turn it back to Pam. And I just want to do a call out to my colleague, Enrique Ledesma from the School of Architecture, who helped with some of the video and the video editing. It was a quick turnaround for this, but I was very appreciative of his help. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.